think we are started. Hey, everybody, this is Dan. All right, how's that better? Hey, this is Dan Sturges. I'm here with Dr. Lee. Hello, Lee.
Hey.
We're here at Lee's waving, saying hello to everybody. There you go. We are here at the merchant's house. We are in the kitchen at the merchant's house. So apologize for the late start. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty with a new laptop, so we had to do a quick last-minute switch of laptops and cameras. So it was a little free-for-all down here in the merchant's house kitchen for a few moments, but we're back up, and here we are at the dark and stormy night here in New York City. And let's see how many people we got. Everybody can hear me okay? You can just shoot a message. We've got quite a few people here. That's cool. Got 19 of us. So tonight's topic, where we're going to be talking about apparitions. And mostly when we think of apparitions, we think of a ghost. We think of a full-bodied, non-vaporous apparition, like they say in Ghostbusters, which normally is the case when we're talking about an apparition. Apparitions come in many different types of forms and shapes and sizes. The ones we'll be talking about tonight are apparitions that parapsychologists are most interested in, and that is an apparition where communication is established and information is transferred back and forth. I'm going to try and play you some videos of apparitions. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do this with this configuration that we're doing. And at worst case scenario, we're going to also be playing you some things that we've captured here. Now, these aren't full-bodied apparitions. We don't see any kind of facial features, and there is no information passed back and forth, but they're very, very curious catches that we've caught. They do kind of establish that something is happening here that is unusual, is happening here at the merchant's house, where Dr. Lee and I, especially Lee, this is his forte into science, and I haven't been able to explain what we've been experiencing here.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, yeah, the data we've collected is still up in the air, as is all direct research data essentially. So what we're working on is just being able to get it more repetitions and get it in ways that is scientifically convincing.
Okay, so now when we're talking about an apparition, most people, when they report an apparition, they're going to, and most apparitions, most times people have these experiences and these perceptions. They don't tell anybody for lots and lots of reasons. They don't want anybody to think they might be crazy. They might not even believe what they witnessed. Or they just write it off, or they don't even know they experienced an apparitional type of haunting because what they experienced looked so much like a real person, which has happened here a few times at the merchant's house, where people have come down after doing a self-guided tour, and they will come down and they'll talk to whoever's running the house that day and say, "Wow, you know what? Your docent upstairs in the period clothes, they were great. They answered all our questions and they were very friendly." And then they go, "Whoa, time out. Our docents don't wear period clothing. They wear, their regular clothes." So we'll pull out a picture of the family and go, do any of these people look familiar? And they'll point to, say, Horace and one of the sons here, Horace Treadwell. And they say, "Well, that was the gentleman that I was speaking to upstairs." And they will say that this person, this figure, looked three-dimensional. They weren't see-through. They interacted with their environment and the people in the environment, meaning that if there's a chair, they're going to walk around the chair. If there are people in the room, they're going to walk around the people. They're going to cast a shadow. Most apparitions, real life apparitions, when people experience these things, apparitions have also shown up in mirrors. So somehow these apparitions, when they manifest, for lack of a better word, they are able to reflect light. These apparitions have light bouncing off them, and then projecting or bouncing off a mirror for a live person to see. So real interesting. And I know I've talked with Lee about this a few times. We've talked about this, Lee, where I say, most apparitions, when people have an apparitional experience, I think it's more here than actually in the room, because if a spirit doesn't have mass or something for light to bounce off and for our eyes, the lenses, to collect and put that data into our brain where we figure out what we're looking at, how would somebody see something without mass?
Yeah, I mean,
physically.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I mean, partially, and by the way, everybody listening, I'm definitely not an expert in physics, so I'm actually consulting some people that are experts in physics about some of the data we've collected here, but that's still in the process of happening. So this may be incorrect, but even, I think photons, I'm not actually sure if they necessarily have defined mass. Yeah, so it's, but regardless, just the fact that like spirits may or may not have mass, we don't really know. That's an assumption too, like that
Right.
they do not. And if they are some kind of energy that isn't necessarily mass, that energy can have effects on the environment that can then be visible. You can warm up the air with energy, and that can create a visible phenomena by, for instance, changing the localized amount of water that's precipitating from the air. That's like cloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are many ways that you can translate energy into something that is visible, even if it doesn't have mass.
Okay. Would it give the ability to reflect light then?
Yeah, absolutely. Clouds reflect light. Right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, but that's a really good distinction in the sense of anytime you see something on camera, it could be emitting light or it could be reflecting light, one of those two things.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, when you see with your eye, there's the third possibility of like maybe your brain is just creating that image, right? There isn't necessarily any light that's entering your eye because your brain can, if you stick an electrode in the right part of the brain and you stimulate it with electricity, you can simulate certain sensations, either touch or vision or whatever. But if it's on camera, yeah, it's one of those two things, either emitting light or reflecting light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, when people here have experiences at the merchant's house regarding something they perceive as a person, we have to assume, if information is being passed, that it's not not a place memory type of haunting, where that is just energy that's being released. Now, you can see an apparition as a place memory haunting, as a place memory ghost. That's what in parapsychology they'll call an apparitional haunting, where you have an interaction with the spirit or the discarnate, where you'll have an interaction with them and they'll convey information that you didn't already know to you, and it's verifiable information. You can go back and check on this stuff, and as which is different than a place memory haunting, and that's what parapsychologists will call a ghost. Literally, when you have something burned into your computer monitor or your TV monitor, it's called the ghost. And so that is something, that's energy just being replayed over, and it's not going to have any kind of interaction. You're going to see that apparition go through a wall or walk upstairs where stairs aren't anymore. It's just something that's replaying. But an apparitional haunting, or intelligent haunting, I think the cool kids on TV call them, there's going to be information passed. It reminds me of a great story that my mentor and dear friend Lloyd Auerbach, he tells a great story of doing an investigation in San Francisco, and he brought a couple of his students down a few-hour ride to this house where a family had just moved in, mom and a dad and a little boy. And the little boy was having an apparitional experiences. He was interacting with an older woman, and nobody else could see this woman. And they called Lloyd and said, "Look, can you come down and tell us what's going on, or do we just have this freaky little kid, or is there really something going on?" So Lloyd sat with this little boy and his two students that had driven down, and started talking to this little boy, and the little boy was interacting with an apparition, and it was an empty chair next to the little boy and his family, and Lloyd and his students, and they started questioning the little boy, and he said, she's right here, you can ask her. So Lloyd was talking to an empty chair, and the boy would then say, well, this is what she's saying. So he was having this experience. He was hearing her, he was seeing her at the time. He described her as an older woman, like a grandma type of figure, and wearing a sweater and a little dress. And she described herself as energy, just pure energy that can appear as any way she wants to appear in her life. She has appeared to this little boy as a little girl, as a teenager, as a grown woman, and also as a grandma. But most of the time, they interacted as a grandmotherly figure. And Lloyd asked, why do you only appear to this little boy? And she said, well, I saw everybody when they were moving in, and I would wave to them, and he was the only one that waved back.
Yeah.
And sure enough, the mother and the father both said, yeah, we did see a lady who waved to us, and we kind of blew it off. We didn't know what was going on, and it didn't look right, or she could have been somebody outside. We just carried on with what we were doing. Anyway, so this little boy was having a conversation with Lloyd for this woman, and Lloyd said, well, do you have any questions for us? And she said, well, Lloyd, what kind of new car are you going to buy? And she started describing all the conversations that these people, Lloyd and his two students, had in the car driving to San Francisco. Lloyd asked a question, is there anything you can give us, any kind of information that we wouldn't know? She said, I dialed this phone number. It's an elder care facility, and my brother lives there, and this is his name. And they called it, and it was all correct.
That's really cool.
It was all correct. And now this is information that the boy could not have known. He could be having an apparitional experience. People can have an apparitional experience, and it's more of an ESP experience where they're gathering information somehow, but it's not coming from a spirit. They're getting this information that they might have hidden somewhere in their subconscious, and it comes out somehow, something triggers it. They might be able to pick up, if you were, sitting with, say, for example, Yuli, they could pick up on any one of your family members that have either passed over or haven't passed over, and then perceive them. It's coming from you. It's psychic rather than an apparitional experience, which is amazing in its own right. But most parapsychologists really focus on an apparitional experience where verifiable information is passed along. I'm sorry, Leah.
No,
looks like you were getting ready to say something.
No, yeah. I mean, one thing that's interesting is, when you hear that story, you think like, okay, well, how was that spirit physically, or how was it appearing to the child and not the others? And like, was it emitting light? Was it reflecting light?
Mm-hmm.
Was it just somehow in the boy's brain? And it, at least from a scientific perspective, it could have honestly been all three, right? Because actually children below a certain age, I don't know how old this kid was, but children below the age of like 5 can actually see more wavelengths of light than you can as an adult, because your lens of your eye actually gets more cloudy as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
So it is theoretically possible that the spirit was perceivable in certain wavelengths that just weren't perceivable by other people with more cloudy lenses.
And I also think that you have to have something to reference in your brain. You have to have something to reference. There's a great story in the West Indies where when the natives on the islands, when Columbus was sailing to the islands, they'd never seen anything like that before. So when the light was reflecting off these ships off in the distance on the horizon and was coming back to the people on the beach, there was nothing for them to reference. You go through your card catalog and so they couldn't see it until they got closer and they recognized wood and people, but the shapes they couldn't recognize. So you try and wonder how many things that we're missing, down here and in the kitchen at the merchant's house that we've just got nothing to refer it to in our brain.
It's not necessarily just like that. That is one possibility. You just don't know what to refer to. But the other possibility is it's just something completely out of place, right? So have you ever seen that classic video? It's like a psychological experiment where you sit down and you watch a video of people passing a ball around, and then a guy in a gorilla suit walks through.
Oh, right.
And like 99% of people never see the guy in the gorilla suit because they're not paying attention to that. Like, why would a guy in a gorilla suit?
Right. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and that might actually be why, like you said, those parents didn't see the lady either. Like, they might have literally seen her, but their brain just kind of threw it away. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, there's a lady floating in the corner there. Like, I'm just gonna ignore that, and then maybe she disappeared a second later, So there are those two possibilities.
Right. And in apparitions, like we said before, there's different classifications of apparitions. There's collective apparitions when multiple people witness this and interact with an apparition. The apparition is in the space. The people describe the apparition the same, and their descriptions are from different angles. So people will see the same apparition, but somebody will say, well, I saw her wearing a ring on her right hand. So, well, I was on the left-hand side, so I couldn't see that. But so they're describing the same apparition, but they've had different experiences with the same apparition. Apparitions of the living, which in this field, nothing is very common, but it's not uncommon for people to have these experiences where they will see an apparition of a family member. It's usually somebody that's very close to them, where there's a real deep connection with this person, and they can have or perceive this person who hasn't died as an apparition. There's also then cases where the people that have been perceived remember seeing that person. So it's almost like double apparitions of the living.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah, at least according to physics, we don't really know whether we are also appearing as apparitions to them, and vice versa, because according to laws of physics, there is no directionality of time, and so that might sound like it's going off the deep end, but that's actually one of the more scientifically established things. There is no reason we know of yet that time really would have a directionality to it. So at least according to physics, like, there's no reason you wouldn't see somebody from 300 years ago walking through this room right now at the same time, right? It's still just not understood why that doesn't happen more often and isn't a common occurrence, honestly. So
I was having a conversation with a colleague years and years ago, and we were talking about frequencies and waves, and pardon me if I sound like an idiot, if everybody in this dimension is going on the same frequency, it's the same wave, could another dimension that is in its own wave, could these waves kind of collide and then you have an experience? Or
that I don't know. Like I said, I don't have a solid enough.
Don't you have all the answers, Lee? You need to have all the answers.
So I mean, the one, like, those are interesting analogies that people often use, like, frequencies, they can be out of sync or in sync, whatever. I don't know enough about alternative dimension theories, etc., to know whether there really is any basis of like that they may be in different frequencies, or as far as I know, that's not the case. But obviously, I'm not I don't know enough to be able to answer that.
Alternative dimension theory.
Yeah.
That's something you don't hear on the ghost shows ever, boy.
That's
great. And that's that's the and just to stroke you a little bit, Lee, that's the best part of this. I've been doing this a long time, and certainly I am limited to what I know, and just getting books and reading and trying to learn as much as I can. But the science is always left out of it, because the books that I'm reading aren't written by scientists, and it's all sort of theory. And a lot of the books that you buy today, Ghost Hunting for Dummies and The Best Way to Ghost Hunt, are written by plumbers and people that don't have a scientific background, and they might be writing about what works for them. But it's great then to go to Lee, who's got this scientific background and can say, well, I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, and scientifically, or you don't know, which is this is our third episode, and we finally discovered that Lee doesn't know everything. And there's a question from Theodore Max. Have you seen Gertrude? I have not seen Gertrude. I have had one actual experience, which I'll talk about later, but I have been in the room with people who have seen Gertrude and have communicated with Gertrude, and Anthony Belov is with us tonight, and he was in the room there when we did this. We were with a medium, a very talented medium, Richard Scholler, and he was having a conversation with her, and she was uncomfortable with. I think there were about five of us, and there were five guys in the room, and she was laying in her bed, and she was uncomfortable with five guys in her room, but she understood what we were doing, and she appreciated what we were doing, but it was something that she wasn't used to, and we did actually catch an EVP that night of what sounds like Get Out, and because I had made a stupid remark, and let's see, we've got another question from Faith Miller. Wants to know if Dr. Lee is an apparition. Well, good guess. The cat's out of the bag. Yeah, Dr. Lee is an apparition. No, Lee, would you explain why you're off camera?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I stay off camera just for various reasons, but largest one is really just in the scientific fields. Spirit research is sort of not appreciated, and it's not helpful to your career. So yeah, at least for the time being. So that may change in the future as we get more data, and as we get data that's convincing other scientists, and this becomes an established field. That can change, but for the time being, unfortunately, that's kind of the reality.
Yeah, and I think also, as far as science go, I think the people that were closed-minded to this, are dying off, and there's
very slowly.
Yeah, very slowly, yeah. But there is another generation of people that have grown up watching the ghost shows and have an interest in that, and go to school and have a scientific background, and they're a little bit more open-minded. So maybe in the future, we'll have more open-minded people that are willing to dive into this, and we could get you on camera, and it can't have to just be me the entire time.
Part of the issue is, in history, like all over, in fact, New York was like the center of the mysticism movement, right? It's like the whole world was kind of becoming more open-minded to spirits, but then all these different examples were discounted, and then those, so that kind of didn't help, right?
Yeah, the spiritualist movement, started upstate New York with the Fox sisters, and there are people that fake stuff, and you've got stuff like the Amityville Horror, which got really, really popular, and just from what I've learned, and I know people that have gone in there and investigated the house, and gone in just to look at the house, and rooms that were supposed to exist just don't even exist, and I think we heard years ago, maybe a decade ago, that it was just a big fake, and
so that's another interesting thing that sort of has to do with how science is conducted, where if you come up with a new research that sort of shows something very controversial, right? One, that'll be initially very hard to get published and to get released to the public, and two, it actually is much easier for somebody to then do a study that counters your claim and get it published in like a very top of the line scientific journal. Right. And that's because everybody's just kind of eager to like see somebody discount your study, right? And so those studies can actually be not performed as scientifically as your study, but just because they're kind of more in line with the general way of thinking, people will be more likely to just be like, okay, this study that discounts your study is more likely true, even though it's not conducted as scientifically. There's a lot of examples of that. Like one example is actually with, I don't know if you know this guy Baxter. He did a bunch of experiments with plants, and he was actually looking into whether they could exhibit any kind of electrophysiological reactions to
is that when people would yell at the plants?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And granted, his studies were not done the best in general scientifically, but he did conduct one study that was somewhat scientific, and he got it published. And then, interestingly, there was an article published refuting his claims, where they repeated the experiment, and it was published in one of the preeminent journals in science. And their data, which was presented in this paper, actually, if you look at it, it seems to actually support his claims. And yet they say in their whole study that their conclusion was that it didn't support the claims, right? So it also depends on how you interpret the data.
Yeah.
But just the fact that they were kind of discounting this idea that was so out there, it just becomes easier for people to say, okay, they must have done the analysis correctly, and therefore, and this guy's wrong, even though their data seems to actually support his study. So there's a lot of examples like that. There's a lot of politics in science.
All right, we've got a question from Mr. Shalom, who wants to know if somebody sees a docent who is an apparition, and if they would try to touch them, would they feel something? A great question, and really, difficult to answer. Um, uh, I think that it would be up to the apparition. As far as touching or being touched, I have been touched and I've been poked in the chest. Now, there was nobody there. I don't think that if somebody was in the room with me watching me, well, somebody was in the room with me, they were behind me, but if they were in front of me and they were watching, now, we weren't in the dark, and they wouldn't have seen my shirt, a depression in my shirt. I don't. There was nothing physically there poking me, but I had the perception of being touched, and I think that is a PK, psychokinesis ability that everybody has to a certain extent. And I think when somebody is in spirit, that is the only way that they can make contact with something is through a psychokinesis ability. And so what happened, if there was a spirit there, and I think that there was, he wanted to touch me. He wanted me to think I was being touched, and he used his PK ability to make it feel like I was touched. So to answer your question, I think it would be up to the person or the docent upstairs that if somebody bumps into me, I'm going to let them feel me. And do what I can, and manifest the energy for them to actually feel something solid. Now, we have people who have the experience of somebody laying in bed with them, or somebody sitting down on the end of the bed, and they can actually feel the bed depressed. They can see a depression in that, but not see anybody. And that's all through PK. I don't think that there is an invisible, solid person that is sitting down and moving things, but it's a person there that is projecting what should happen. Like Lee, what you were saying before with the person walking by in a gorilla suit, it's maybe we're not perceiving because it's something we just can't wrap our heads around, and it's interacting with the physical world at the same time.
Yeah, and again, at least from the scientific perspective, we don't really know how they may or may not be causing these effects, and it might indeed be like a psychokinesis thing where the spirit has a mind and they intend something to happen and therefore it does. But the underlying mechanism of that, we wouldn't know either. One way in which you can actually create like a sensation of touch without actually anything physical there is just through electrical stimulation, right? So our nerves react, they function via movement of ions, and that's how they transmit signals to your brain. So, again, like back to the solid versus energy thing, like even just with pure energy, you can actually create the sensation of a touch. And if you control that energy correctly, you could create like a very, realistic sensation of a touch. So to do the simplest simulation of a touch, you can just send like one really quick, it could be called like a square wave, which is just kind of a quick little blip of electricity. Feel a little zap, right? Like static electricity. That's not something physical. That's just charges moving in the air. There are various ways in which you can simulate that sensation of touch.
All right, I'm going to try and using a foreign computer here to pull up some videos of apparitions, and if I get lost here, I apologize, but yeah, that's the Zoom. Where would be? Yeah.
You're looking for the email, or
yeah,
back in your
there we
browser.
are. Okay, and then I'm going to pull this up, and then I'm going to share my screen. Go back to Zoom. Yeah. You guys having fun out there?
Yeah, in the meantime, you can enjoy the surroundings of the
Here we are. Screen. All right, I'm going to share this. And get back here. All right. I'm going to play this. It's about 5 minutes in. And I love this video. Here we are. This was filmed 1990, I believe. So before a lot of technical advances on phones. People could do editing in the subway. This was filmed on VHS tape in a notoriously haunted place in England, I believe, the Barnley place. And it's a camera pointing down the hall, and we can see what looks like the shadow, or at least the apparition of a person sitting in a chair. And then it looks like at some point they get up and walk away, and then somebody else seems to come in. Yeah, it looks like they stand up after sitting down. Now, I know that this footage has gone through the ringer. A lot of people have examined this footage, and there's been no explanation that they've come up with. See, the person just sort of walked out of frame, and then shortly we'll see another one come in. There you go. So while that's, we can't make out any kind of clothes. Wish you could see this, Lee. What somebody is wearing and facial features, we do see people walking back and forth. I thought it might have been a shadow of somebody behind the camera, but I did see the layout of the house, and there's where the camera was. There's just a wall. Nobody could get behind the camera.
So it's interesting that that kind of brings up like the third possibility of the way in which you can see these apparitions. Right? We were talking about reflecting light, emitting light, but the other way is absorbing light, right? So if it absorbs light too, then it's going to sort of appear as black because no light reflects off it essentially.
Right.
Which is actually pretty intriguing too, because that might mean that it's sort of gaining energy from the photons that it absorbs.
All right, this next one is this could be one of my favorites. I'm going to tell you. Oh, look at that! Not now. It's a Facebook video. Now I'm going to give you a little backstory on this. There is the woman in this who owns this clip. It was her cell phone, and when she's getting ready for dinner and she's cooking and going about her chores at home, she would give her young son her phone just to play with, and he would play around and he would hit the camera sometime. Now this happened on Mother's Day. Oh yeah, you can see this. You can look. The camera's not pointing at you. So this happened on Mother's Day, which happened to be a year to the day where this woman Daisy, who owns this footage, her mom passed away. So the little boy's playing with the phone, and he catches this person next to him. All right. And if I had a picture of Daisy's mom, that's what she looked like. And she is convinced that that's her mom. And look at that. This is just my favorite. And the boy doesn't seem to be acknowledging somebody next to him, which, might not be unusual, but side-by-side pictures of the woman's mom and that on the camera it's pretty creepy. It looks just like her. Yeah, let's see. Does anybody have any questions or comments yet? No, not yet. All right, let's look at another video. Let's see which one this is. Oh, okay. This person, told me it was a shadow figure, and they were having noises. They were experiencing noises in their basement. Not sold on this one, but they did catch something that's interesting. So when this pops up.
Let's watch. See, bro, there's nothing on this fucking door. Hello?
You can see some legs.
I'm not going down.
That's pretty crazy. Again, I'm not totally sold on this one, but interesting. sent to me.
That's the sort of unfortunate reality of the of these photos or videos. They're very rare. You know, they aren't captured often, and so it's hard scientifically to validate them because they can't be replicated in a consistent manner. At least so far, they don't seem to be that consistent. And also, there's so many ways to, unfortunately, like you said, at least these days, fake that stuff. You know, you can use an app and just in 2 minutes add an apparition to a video in which there isn't one. So we have some videos, like Dan said, from the Merchant House as well. And even though they're still up in the air, and that's partially because to get a better scientific validation that what is captured on the camera is truly something paranormal, we have to see it possibly affect other types of sensors too, in addition to the camera. So, you know, for instance, I don't know if we have the videos that we have recorded at the Merchant House.
I'm pulling them up now. Yeah, they have to be downloaded. So.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, essentially, what they are if you are into ghost hunting shows at all, they're very similar to the traditional orbs.
Here, let's talk about these then. You know, I've got the first one. This is recorded at the Merchant's House. This was early on in 2020, when the pandemic hit. You know, the Merchant's House had to shut down. And, you know, trying to find a silver lining in something as horrible as a global pandemic, we were able to come in and set up a ton of cameras, and Lee is creating equipment and really building stuff tailored for specific rooms in the house. But this was early on, and just to see what would happen in a house, in a haunted house all by itself. Yeah. So this is one of the first things I think that we caught that was real interesting. This is in the main hallway. Now, I'm going to let Lee explain why that's not a bug. And because if somebody had sent that to me and I looked at it, I would say, well, that's a bug. But Lee, when I said, Lee, I think that might be a bug, he really, I mean.
No, absolutely. The thing is, it very well might be. And so that's what I was saying. You know, we have to find other ways of verifying that this is indeed something, you know, paranormal. So there are various ways in which, in fact, I think this video is the one that kind of set off our ideas for doing this show, because it very well could be a bug, but there are also ways to prove scientifically whether or not it is. So for instance, you could, if you had cameras on both sides and you saw it sort of go into the door and then pop out on the other side, like you saw in that video, that's obviously not bug behavior. Another way to do that is if you have sensors in the hallway that detect fluctuations in some other energy, for instance, capacitive sensors, electromagnetic sensors, temperature sensors, whatever, something that a bug wouldn't affect. You know, there are ways to validate whether or not that is something paranormal.
All right, here's a video that we caught up in Mrs. Treadwell's room, which is 2 flights directly above us. Mrs. Treadwell, Eliza's room, happens to be the most active room, so we really focused on that and put a lot of cameras. Lee had you had a thermal camera in there. We had directional audio sensors. I mean, you know, you name it, and Lee was making it and bringing it and putting it in Eliza's room. And this we caught off of a camera. It was able to trigger the motion detector on the camera, so the camera tried to follow it, but it was going a little too fast. Let's see here.
Yeah, so in that instance, there were actually like 3 or 4 of those anomalies all at the same time. Right. And so, yeah, we haven't yet observed like a correlation of those visual anomalies with activating some other types of sensors. So that sort of falls in the, for the time being, in the ballpark of like, we don't yet know. There's no yet validation that those are paranormal. Right.
And, you know, they could certainly just be regular old dust orbs. If it wasn't, you know, my video and somebody sent that to me, I would say, hey, great catch, guys. You got some dust orbs. But knowing the thought that goes into examining these videos and you know, with Lee's scientific eye to say, you know what, I'm not exactly sure that these are dust orbs, because you know, those are the only things we caught that night. You know, I
Yeah,
mean,
but-
what are the chances of a house built in 1832 that's empty, you know, for the year? This might have been empty for a couple of months now, that there was only 2 dust orbs in one room
Yeah.
the entire time.
Yeah.
So, but it's certainly possible, certainly possible. I wouldn't say it wasn't. So
Yeah.
let's move on to the next. Let's see here. Doing this fast so nobody can see your name on the email. All right. These are starting to, we started catching what we were calling zaps. And I think this is one of the zaps. Yep, you can see it right here in front of the mirror. This is where we were last show. We were set up right here. Let's play this one more time. Yep. And then I think, Lee, you just isolated the yeah, we can't see it that well here. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not large enough really for you guys to see. I wish I had another computer.
So yeah, what those screenshots are showing are we would occasionally get in a single frame in the videos, we'd see sort of these brief light flashes that were sort of linear, and sometimes there were multiple segments of them, so they were kind of arrayed in a line. But because they were always happen in just a single frame of the video, there's, you know, it could just be an anomaly. It could be something due to electromagnetic radiation that's sort of messing with the camera sensor. We don't really know. And it was only on rare occasions that we were able to observe one of those anomalies traveling between 2 separate frames along a sort of linear path.
Right. This right here, this zap was strong enough to, again, to trigger the motion detector on the camera, and it tracked it. We'll play it again. It appears right up here, just briefly, like Lee was saying, for just a single frame, but the camera tracks it. Boom. And then we've got an isolated photograph of just that zap. Let's see if I can make this larger. Yeah. So you can see it right here. And is that electricity? I mean.
Yeah, what was interesting was a lot of times those zaps appeared to follow sort of the contours of things in the room. For instance, that one kind of appears to be like almost traveling down the hallway. Right. Those multiple segments to it too, they're both, you know, a lot of times there's like 3 or 4 segments in it that are all traveling in the same linear direction, which is interesting. But again, it was only on a rare occasion, maybe on 2 occasions, where we could actually see it travel between 2 separate video frames. So one way to look into whether those were indeed something paranormal was we tried to have multiple cameras all looking at the same area, so that if one of the cameras captured that zap, if that zap did indeed exist and was in the room, the other camera should capture it too. But we unfortunately weren't able.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of success with that, which you know, again, you know, I've caught a lot of EVP, and we did an EVP show a couple months ago. And, you know, we've had people with multiple recorders and only captured the EVP on one recorder. So, so who's to say that that wouldn't happen with, I mean, it's hard to call these apparitions, and we're not, but it is something physical in the room that seems to have come out of nowhere.
Yeah, and in the case of the EVPs, if you have multiple recorders and you record on one, that's actually showing you that maybe something paranormal, because that's not usual for sound to only be on one. But with cameras, it's the opposite. You know, if something does exist in the room and both cameras are looking in that direction, you know, you would expect both cameras to pick it up.
Right. So here's another example of these zaps. And it happens over here on the right side of the frame by this bureau. I'll play it again, and then we'll show you a close-up. That one is huge.
Yeah. And so this is actually a dual frame one. So it's actually in 2 consecutive camera frames that it can be seen to travel.
What's the significance of that?
So the significance of that is if it's only appearing in a single frame, that could just be just an artifact that occurs on the camera sensor. So there could be just like a little tiny electrical spark essentially that's caused by, particles from outer space, honestly. They do exist and they can cause like these instantaneous interference in certain types of sensors. But the fact that it travels between 2 separate frames suggests that it's not something, a single particle flying from outer space and hitting our camera lens. It's actually something traveling through space in front of the camera. And it's traveling at a speed that's detectable across 2 frames of the video, which these cameras, they only recorded, I think, 20 frames per second. So not all that quickly. So the fact that it was traveling at that slow speed and in a continuous motion is indicative of something possibly interesting. So one issue that I have with this video is that we don't fully know, the software that's in these cameras and the ways that they can sort of glitch out. So one thing that I'm hesitant about that I think could possibly explain this, but again, since we don't understand how these cameras fully process the video, we don't know, is that could be maybe the flight path of like a more slowly moving bug, but the camera might have, for instance, skipped frames by accident in the frame acquisition. And so it looks like it's traveling a lot faster than it actually is because it's only across 2 frames, when in reality, the bug might have been going more gradually, and for some reason the camera dropped those frames and got thrown out. In fact, that's exactly a problem like that is what recently caused the helicopter that's currently on Mars to glitch out. So it was flying in an area, this is beyond sort of what they initially designed it for, but it was flying in an area that they did not have proper mapping for. And so it had to map its own flight. And so it was relying entirely on its camera to get those frames and feed it back to its software so it can analyze it and compare that with its accelerometers and know the way it tilted, etc. But it missed just a single frame. And because it missed that single frame, it then thought that the next frame went where that frame went. And so it had its timing off between the video frames it was acquiring and the other data it was acquiring from other sensors. And that screwed it entirely up. It started swaying and almost crashed. Wow. So that kind of thing happens, right? Yeah. I mean, if it happened to this helicopter on Mars, it can happen to our $20 camera
at the merchant's house.
Yeah, it's, if this happened very frequently, that would become less of a possibility. But because that kind of thing only happened once or twice, it's possible that it was just kind of a rare occurrence of that kind of issue happening.
Okay, Rebecca was just asking if we had any footage of what was happening at the merchant's house. We just played a bunch. And we've got just a few more minutes that we're going to be on. So if anybody's got any other questions for us that you'd like to try and answer, go ahead and shoot us something. Somebody, if you reached out to me in any way, I was bumped off the internet. Anthony. Anthony, we're trying to do a show here, Anthony. Yeah, he got bumped off. He was just coming back in saying hello.
So one thing that is just sort of general advice to people that are using video cameras, and like you said, you can record these dust orbs frequently. One issue that can lead to a lot of false positives in terms of anomalies is if you have any kind of spotlight coming from your camera, right? So for instance, infrared cameras, a lot of times they'll actually have an infrared light that's lit that reflects off of everything in the room, and then the camera captures it. And so by having that spotlight, even though infrared light is not visible to your eyes, it is light and it's being emitted and it can reflect off of things. So that can create these orbs much more easily than otherwise. So dust floating through the air that's out of focus can reflect that light being emitted from that infrared spotlight and look like something bigger and more mysterious than it is.
I have a question here from, let's see, Diane. Have there been times when you have seen something and heard something at the same time? Yes, I have not. I here at the merchant's house, again, like I said earlier, I've only had one sort of apparitional experience, and it was at my apartment, and it was just for a moment, and it's probably just my imagination. But like I said before, I have been in the room with people here at the merchant's house who have been having a conversation with Gertrude. We did a seance, my second investigation here ever in 2006, 2007. And Richard Scholler, the medium here, was having a conversation with Mr. Treadwell, who was very upset that Richard had called this house a flop house at one point. And Mr. Treadwell got very, very upset. And Richard described Mr. Treadwell, as far as we know, pretty accurately. He did bring up his ponytail. Now there is a giant portrait of Mr. Treadwell, which would have been right behind Richard where he was sitting that night, but you can't see a ponytail. You have to look for it. So Richard was experiencing somebody with a ponytail. But I personally tell you the story about my little apparition real quick. I had picked up my laundry at the laundromat, and I was bringing it in. I was folding it and putting it in my into my drawers, my dresser. And I picked something up, and as I turned, I just kind of glanced at the doorway into my bedroom, and it looked like a tiny little girl in the doorway. And it was just a split second where I saw her just turning, and I went right back, and she was gone. But it definitely was a little girl and looked like she was in like white night clothes, maybe, which is so cliche. That's what everybody describes when they see an apparition of a woman. She was in her night clothes and had dark hair, but that's what she looked like. But you know, it happened for a moment. I pulled out I got totally geeked out and went into ghost hunter mode and pulled out all my recorders and EMF meters, and nothing. But that's the only time that I saw something that I thought might have been an apparition. Otherwise, you know, I just come in and other people have the experiences, and I catalog what they experience. Lee, have you ever had anything like that?
No, personally, no. Yeah,
Have you ever, Theodore is asking if we have ever recorded a spirit in the garden. You know, we've never done an investigation outside in the garden, which is lovely and open to doing weddings, birthday parties, contact the house. But we've never done one there. It's really sort of polluted with sound out there. So it would be hard to do an investigation out there and get anything very accurate. There's just too many things that can contaminate a recording or a video recording. There's you know, the merchant's house, inside the house, we've got plenty going on. We don't need to go outside. And inside this house is, you know, to do a scientific investigation, you need a controlled environment. And this is as a controlled environment as a paranormal investigator can find. So we haven't gone outside.
yeah, those are really good points. Exactly.
All right. And well, listen, I think we're going to wrap it up here. We want to thank everybody for their patience and tuning in. It was a little hectic starting out. Oh, I think we got one more. We had people in the garden. Oh, okay. That's Anthony. We've had people in the garden hear the piano being played in the parlors. Okay, so this is coming from Anthony Belovs, one of the board members here at the Merchant's House, and he is saying that people have been outside and have heard people playing the piano in the parlors, and for years that piano wasn't even playable. It is now, but for years that piano wasn't playable. So if I were to guess, I would say they were hearing some kind of place memory, having a place memory type of experience. So
yeah,
it's all right.
Maybe it's related to like EVP reported last time of Mr. Treadwell
Exactly.
about how he played the piano.
Exactly. Or, you know, it could be, you know, piano music from somewhere else in the neighborhood. So all right, we're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and being patient with us and waiting for us. It got a little hectic here in the very beginning because we're working with different equipment and really slap this up together in just a few minutes. So appreciate your patience. Appreciate you guys hanging in there. We'll be back next month. We'll send out a notification to everybody about what the theme will be and the exact date, and we'll talk to you then. So thanks everybody. I'm going to figure out how to stop this, and we'll be on our way. We're going to do a little investigation right now. So wish us luck. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Holy cow. Winging that, man. Yeah. Wow, this is all out of order.